Reich Marshal Hermann Göring scoffed at the intelligence report on May 28, 1940. The document detailed President Roosevelt's audacious request to Congress for the capacity to manufacture 50,000 aircraft annually. "The Americans are desperate if they believe such propaganda will frighten us," Göring sneered to his staff. He dismissed their industrial potential, believing the conversion of automobile factories to warplane production was impossible. What Göring tragically failed to grasp was that in Detroit, former General Motors president William Knudsen was already proving him wrong. Working for $1 a year as Roosevelt's production chief, Knudsen was orchestrating an industrial transformation that would soon eclipse Germany's wildest fears. Within 4 years, American factories would produce not the impossible 50,000 aircraft Göring dismissed, but nearly 100,000 planes annually, all while supplying 2 theaters of war across opposite oceans. Roosevelt's proclamation, made on May 16, 1940, as German Panzers raced across France, was met with skepticism even among allies. In 1939, America had produced only 3,611 military aircraft, and the Army Air Corps possessed only 1,700 combat planes, many of which were obsolete. Yet, Roosevelt demanded a 14-fold increase in production. William Knudsen, bringing the principles of automotive mass production to aircraft manufacturing, became the architect of this miracle. By December 1941, American factories were already producing 2,000 military aircraft monthly, a 20-fold increase from 2 years earlier. The arsenal of democracy was awakening, with Boeing announcing the massive bomber plant at Willow Run, Michigan, and Boeing and Douglas Aircraft expanding operations and hiring thousands of workers. The Nazi leadership's dismissal of American capabilities was rooted in racial prejudice and willful blindness. General Friedrich von Bottischer, the military attaché in Washington, sent accurate reports describing American industrial mobilization, even warning Berlin in December 1940 that American war production would reach unimaginable heights. Hitler, however, dismissed these warnings as defeatist exaggeration, instead ranting about American racial degeneracy and proclaiming them half Judaized, half Negrified, and incapable of sustained warfare. This ideological blindness was fatal. Luftwaffe intelligence dismissed reports of women entering aircraft factories as a sign of desperation. German analysts simply could not conceive that a democratic mobilization could exceed totalitarian command, assuming that reports of factories running 3 shifts must be exaggeration. Ford's Willow Run plant was the ultimate embodiment of American ambition. Constructed on farmland starting in April 1941, it became the world's largest factory under one roof, with a mile-long assembly line. Charles Sorensen, Ford's production chief, promised to build 1 B-24 Liberator bomber per hour, when other factories managed 1 per day. Initial results were catastrophic, with the first bomber requiring complete rebuilding in September 1942, and quality control failures reaching 50%. Critics, calling it "Will It Run?" scoffed when the plant produced only 56 bombers monthly by February 1943. However, Ford engineers persevered, breaking the B-24's nearly 500,000 parts into manageable subassemblies. They developed moving assembly lines and accommodated 578 design changes in 1943 alone while maintaining production. The breakthrough came in April 1944, when Willow Run produced 428 B-24s, one every 63 minutes, 24 hours daily. This single factory was outproducing the entire German aviation industry. German pilots first recognized American production superiority during the Tunisia campaign. Major Johannes Steinhoff, commanding JG-77, noted in December 1942, "The American pilots are no longer amateurs. Most disturbing, there are more of them every day." By October 1943, during Black Thursday at Schweinfurt, the Americans could lose 60 B-17s and replace them within 2 weeks. The mathematics had become inescapable. During Big Week in February 1944, the 8th and 15th Air Forces mounted 3,500 bomber sorties against German aircraft production. The Luftwaffe lost between 262 and 355 fighters, but more critically, approximately 100 irreplaceable veteran pilots. General Adolf Galland reported to Göring that Germany was losing 1,200 fighters monthly while producing only 1,000. America, conversely, was producing 2,500 fighters monthly while losing only 400. Major Heinz Barer described a January 1944 mission over Brunswick, where the bomber stream stretched from horizon to horizon, at least 700 flying fortresses and liberators. We were 8 fighters against hundreds. It was hopeless. By 1944, American aircraft production reached staggering proportions. That year alone, factories produced 96,270 aircraft, a total that exceeded Germany's entire wartime output of approximately 94,677 aircraft. The disparity went beyond numbers. American bombers were heavily armed and featured powered turrets, advanced bomb sights, and sophisticated navigation equipment. German fighters, meanwhile, increasingly launched with partial ammunition loads and often lacked functioning radios. Boeing's Seattle plant was producing 16 B-17s daily by May 1944. Douglas Aircraft, which had only 68 employees in 1936, had grown to 167,000 workers across 9 facilities. North American Aviation turned out 500 P-51 Mustangs monthly, and Lockheed achieved production of 1 P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes. Supporting industries matched this pace. General Motors produced 57,658 aircraft engines under license. Alcoa's aluminum output increased 600%, and Dow Chemical's magnesium production grew from 6 million pounds annually to 333 million pounds. The transformation of America's workforce shattered Nazi preconceptions. Women, comprising less than 1% of aircraft workers in 1941, represented 65% by 1943, totaling 310,000 in the aircraft industry. Rose Will-Monroe, the original Rosie the Riveter, drove 3,000 rivets per shift at Willow Run with 99.5% accuracy. Women inspectors at Douglas Aircraft reduced defect rates from 3.2% to 0.3%. German intelligence interpreted female employment as desperation and dismissed the workers as temporary, predicting a quality collapse. Instead, precision improved. Their integration represented democratic strength, not weakness. As American production soared, Germany retreated into fantasy. Göring authorized the Jaeger program, dispersing production into 729 underground facilities using slave labor. The Mittelwerk complex, which employed 60,000 prisoners in horrific conditions, produced more defects than aircraft. Slave laborers sabotaged components, and the entire Mittelwerk complex produced fewer engines monthly than Ford's single Chicago plant. Meanwhile, American innovation accelerated. Boeing developed modular B-29 construction with completely interchangeable parts. By early 1945, America was producing 100 pressurized B-29s monthly. The D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944, demonstrated the culmination of American production. The invasion employed 11,590 Allied aircraft against 319 German sorties, a 36-to-1 superiority. This was industrial annihilation. The P-51 Mustangs, which possessed the range to reach Poland and performance to match any opponent, existed in quantities that made losses irrelevant. German pilots called them Indians, swarming everywhere simultaneously.
Even Nazi leadership acknowledged the catastrophe. In December 1944, Goebbels wrote in his diary, "Göring's promises about Luftwaffe superiority now seem criminal delusions. We fight the world's greatest industrial power with rhetoric." Hitler himself admitted in January 1945, "We should have listened to Bachter's reports. Their industrial potential was decisive. While we built hundreds, they built tens of thousands." Germany's Me-262 Jet fighter represented genuine innovation. 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. Hitler and Göring believed this wonder weapon could restore air superiority. But Germany produced only 1,430 Me-262s total, with never more than 200 operational simultaneously. Critical materials were unavailable, forcing inferior substitutions. America, meanwhile, had begun jet development in 1942, and Lockheed's P-80 Shooting Star, superior to any German jet, entered production before the war's end. American industrial depth allowed the simultaneous pursuit of multiple technologies, a luxury Germany couldn't afford. Germany's technological superiority meant nothing against America's ability to produce thousands of conventional fighters while simultaneously developing next-generation aircraft. Quality without quantity proved worthless in total war. Göring's arrest in May 1945 marked the beginning of his confrontation with reality. While initially defiant, maintaining that German technology had been superior, he eventually admitted his error to Major Kenneth Heckler in July 1945. "I knew American industrial potential was great, but the execution exceeded my worst fears." He admitted that single factory at Willow Run produced more aircraft than our entire bomber force at peak. It was incomprehensible. He was astonished by American logistics, noting, "We couldn't adequately supply forces 500 miles from Germany. You supplied armies 5,000 miles from America." At the Nuremberg trial, the mathematical reality was undeniable. Charts showed America producing more aircraft monthly by 1944 than Germany managed annually. Films of Willow Run's assembly lines played while prosecutors listed German cities destroyed by bombers from that single factory. Göring testified, "I never imagined they could increase aircraft production 100-fold in 4 years. Such growth seemed physically impossible." He became fixated on Willow Run, calling it "that damned factory that broke our backs." When shown that America had produced 812,675 aircraft engines versus Germany's 241,675, Göring simply stared at the figures in silence. The transformation's scope remains staggering even today. From 3,611 military aircraft in 1940, America produced 295,959 by war's end. 2 million Americans worked in aircraft production at peak, including unprecedented diversity: women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, and other diverse groups. This democratic mobilization achieved what totalitarian command could not. Voluntary cooperation exceeded forced labor's output by every metric. The workers who entered factories in 1941 knowing nothing about aircraft emerged in 1945 as the world's most skilled aviation workers, having revolutionized manufacturing itself. Automation principles pioneered at Willow Run transformed global manufacturing. The financial dimensions defied economic orthodoxy. Aircraft production consumed the equivalent of $800 billion today. Yet rather than bankrupting America, war production created unprecedented prosperity. Unemployment vanished completely, and personal income doubled between 1940 and 1945. Germany, conversely, consumed 40% of its entire industrial capacity for aircraft production by 1944, yet produced less than half the American output. Slave labor, increasingly relied upon, was catastrophically counterproductive due to endemic sabotage and quality collapse. Productivity per German worker actually declined after 1943. While American productivity increased 300%. Beyond raw production lay organizational excellence. The War Production Board coordinated 184,000 companies seamlessly. American adaptability was also key. When combat revealed the B-17's vulnerability to frontal attacks, Boeing added chin turrets within 60 days. German modifications often took months or years. The democratic flow of information, from combat observations to engineers and from engineers to assembly lines, proved superior to German hierarchical command. On October 15, 1946, hours before his scheduled execution, Hermann Göring wrote his final letter containing his most complete admission of the production war's significance. The Americans won through industrial power, not military prowess. We were not defeated by better soldiers, but by better factories. The nation we dismissed as capable only of building consumer goods buried the Wehrmacht under aluminum and steel. His last recorded statement was, "We declared war on an industrial giant while it slept. When it awoke, we were doomed." He committed suicide that night, but his final testimony stands as history's verdict on the production war. Military historians consider the American production achievement the decisive factor in Allied victory. Without the overwhelming material superiority it provided, D-Day would have been impossible, the bombing campaign unsustainable, and the Pacific War unwinnable. Richard Overy, a leading historian of the Air War, concluded that the outcome was determined not by fighting spirit or tactical brilliance, but by the weight of material. By 1944, America alone was producing more military aircraft than the rest of the world combined, Axis and Allied. This was order of magnitude dominance. The production miracle transcended military victory. It proved democracy's superiority to dictatorship and freedom's advantage over tyranny. The workers who achieved this transformation were free citizens united in common purpose, not slaves or conscripts. Hermann Göring's dismissal of American production capacity stands as history's most catastrophic miscalculation. His contempt for democratic industrial potential cost Germany the war and millions of lives. America's transformation from 3,000 to 100,000 aircraft annually demonstrated that free societies, when facing existential threats, could achieve the impossible. They didn't just meet Roosevelt's goal, they doubled it. Göring's mockery of democratic industrial capacity became history's most expensive joke. America produced 295,959 military aircraft, while Germany produced 94,677. But the real victory lay not just in numbers, but in method, proving that free workers could outproduce slaves, and democratic cooperation could exceed totalitarian command. The B-24 bombers rolling off Willow Run's assembly line every 63 minutes were America's answer to tyranny. Each rivet driven by a woman who had been a housewife months earlier proved that free peoples, when united in a righteous cause, could bury tyranny under an avalanche of production. Göring's laughter at the idea of 50,000 planes echoed through history as the sound of catastrophic miscalculation. The fatal dismissal of democracy's arsenal by a man who understood neither democracy nor production sealed his fate and the fate of everything he represented under 300,000 aircraft that turned his contempt into history's most complete defeat.